Yeah, yeah. Two people in waiting room. Admit all. Yeah. I think we are going live. Alphamata admit. Okay. Any updates, Geeta, from Praveena? You're muted.
Yeah, I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up.
Okay. Uh-huh. So what do you suggest we do?
Shall we just have the discussion without her?
Yeah, maybe if whenever she can join us.
Yeah, as she joins, I mean, like if it happens, that will be great, and then
Oh,
she
yeah.
can take over from us then. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Hi, and Merry Christmas to all of you. And unfortunately, today's moderator, Praveena Cooper, has been having some major issues with her internet. I believe her the internet in her entire neighborhood is just broken down for some reason. So what Nikhila and I have planned is to just go ahead with the discussion without without the moderator for this session. So of course we have all watched the film, David Fincher's Fight Club, and anyone who is ready to say something about the film is free to just come in at any point. I'm sure it must have been a difficult film to watch because of the terribly violent and gross scenes in it. So you really need, I think, a strong stomach to watch a film like Fight Club. But at the same time, it's an extremely interesting film, and it's also a very rich text. Although it's a pretty old film made in 1999, it's it's almost like a cult classic now, and it's a textbook film. A lot of film studies courses teach Fight Club to this day because of its richness and also its relevance to our own times. So anyone who would like to say anything, and if you just have to search the internet, and there are hundreds of interpretations of Fight Club. You have a psychoanalytic analysis of it, and you have a Nietzschean analysis. It's just endless. So anyone who would like to say something after this very short, impromptu kind of introduction, if you may call it so, that I have given. Anyone would like to say anything about how what the film meant to you and what you thought of it? Yeah, yeah,
Geeta,
Nikhil.
just by way of beginning again,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I came to, I mean, I had heard this film, but never really, like many Hollywood films, once they're out of the theaters, you may not have access to them. And you may not go out seeking these films either. but the occasion or the context in which I looked for this film, searched really hard, and finally found a copy online and watched it was when I was looking to teach another film. This is a Kannada film called Lucia by Pawan Kumar, and I don't know, some of you may have heard the film. And I was looking to teach the film, also write about it in some context. And one of the claims that are made about Lucia is that it is I mean, it is heavily influenced by many Hollywood films, including Inception. This idea of lucid dreaming and all that comes from Christopher Nolan's Inception, and a host of other films. But Pawan Kumar himself, in the course of an interview, had mentioned Fight Club. And so I was curious to watch this film. And the moment I watched it, I was completely taken in by, the way in which the narrative works, completely undermining all our expectations. So there we are, generally the voiceover is a figure of authority. We go along with whatever the voiceover tells us, in most films. So here too, one thought that one was watching a film being narrated in first person by the voiceover, who is, talking about another character, and suddenly to think that this other character is, simply a creation of one of the characters, was mind blowing for me. I mean, I had not watched too many films that kind of work where the character becomes, where the narrator becomes a character, and then the character itself seems to be misleading us as viewers. So, in terms of, when we talk about focalization, and where we talk about the difference in knowledge between the character and the spectators, the viewers, generally we seem to have control as viewers. Often we seem to have control over the process of narration when we know more about the characters. But in this film, the character is completely misleading us, and as viewers, we feel that we have been taken for a ride virtually by this character. So I was completely fascinated by the narrative technique. I'm sure, I mean, the content too was very, very interesting. But for me, this film, I keep going back to it whenever whenever I want to teach this kind of narration, a narration where the character has control over the relay of information to us as spectators. So in that sense, it made, it was wonderful viewing for me. The first time, when I saw it some 7 or 8 years ago, probably 6 years ago. And now again, when I watched it, I was very, very fascinated by the technique that he uses to narrate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, it takes a couple of minutes for us to even realize that Tyler is not a character, but an invention of the narrator's imagination.
Right.
And very cleverly, Fincher gives us some pointers to it, like for instance, both of them carrying the identical briefcase on the flight.
Yes.
And also in that car crash, Tyler is initially driving the car, but then when he emerges from under the car after the crash. He's coming out from the co-driver's seat and the narrator from the driver's seat. So, a few indications like this, and then we slowly begin to realize that he's not exactly another character in the film, but
Hmm.
it's just, maybe you could call him the alter ego of the narrator, or just a figment of his imagination, created
Hmm.
by the character himself.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyone else would like
Yeah,
to?
so in that sense, there were a host of other films after that which I became very interested in
Yes,
watching. Yeah. So
yeah.
just a second, there are people who are joining us. Yeah.
Okay.
So films like Shutter Island and also Mulholland Drive, David Lynch's film. So found all of these very fascinating, precisely because this kind of taking us as spectators for a ride by the character happens. In fact, that is the characteristic of Lucia, and through Lucia, I went on to watch other such films because Pawan Kumar has brought in a new kind of narration to Kannada cinema. So
Mhm.
I was trying to see where are the interconnections, where is it coming from, and that's how I went on to watch some of these films. It's a very, very fascinating film for me. Yeah.
Okay. Would anyone else like to take it forward from here? Any aspect of the film, not necessarily the narrative. Yes, Kalpalata?
Yeah, when as you told us that it was very difficult to watch, and when I started watching, it really took me some time to continue because I saw this film in parts because it was very difficult for me to continue watching in one go because it was the story was not easy to grasp first of all, and it was all the dark visuals which I saw. And later when I was very sure that there is a very deep philosophical meaning in the text, in the cinematic text of this film. And later I found that it is full of Nietzschean philosophy, where it is a very severe it is a critique of utilitarian society and the material, and the other voice which is there in the main character is always criticizing this world. And but it is also that he at one point he starts dominating, which is again Nietzsche was against this, that he was against any moral absolutism, that nobody can tell you the value, you have to find your own value, what he said in his philosophy. And this is what happens in the end. He shoots the other voice, and this is the end of the other voice. And uh, from here he starts living his own life, and he creates his own reality in the end. So this is how I saw this, and there are a lot of he talks that the character starts talking directly to the audience, and at the same time the other character is also in conversation with the main character. So there are a lot, it is very rich, and every dialogue I think it can be uh, studied very deeply. Each and every dialogue has very deep meanings in it. Yeah, so this is what I saw here. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, in fact, even a lot of the, like you spoke about the dialogues, even that, could be said that it's an influence of the Nietzschean style, like Nietzsche was known for his aphoristic style of writing. And similarly, here also the character of Tyler is full of, aphorisms. Like there are so many of his lines which are memorable lines that he speaks, and So I guess even the even that style is to some extent Nietzschean, apart from, of course, the philosophy that underlies it, and that's one part of it. But there are also, there are people who have looked at it as a critique of consumerism, and when they do that, then they bring in social thinkers like Adorno and Horkheimer. So, like I said right at the beginning, difficult to watch film, but extremely rich. The text is so rich that you can just look at it from so many different lenses. And of course, there is masculinity and various themes that fill the film, and which can be actually looked at in very profound ways. Yeah, so anyone else would like to speak about? Yes, Jayanto?
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing about this being a critique of consumerism, the consumerist American society, uh, is at least in this film, it is vis-a-vis man's, the American male's idea of himself, that he has to find himself uh, from totally inane things, or in totally inane things, and when he has no longer any socially relevant role to play, um, I wonder how it will be to compare this, But this has become almost like a cliche as to, um, although there is a lot of violence in this film, there is, a whole lot of physicality in this film. And that seems to be one way in which masculinity sort of redeems itself, when it finds itself in a crisis by asserting your male physical self, But otherwise, it is equally applicable in today's situation to man as well as woman. I'm thinking about how it will be interesting to study this from kind of a society like Indian, for instance, which is again there is a very very sometimes it is almost toxic masculinity which is on display, but then the reasons are commercial, consumerist, as well as a sanction of a traditionally patriarchal society. So how would such a society view this kind of a crisis in this? Is it the fact that one sees women becoming more and more self-assertive, that masculinity feels threatened? Because it cannot be only consumerism which uh, creates this kind of a toxicity in the perceived self as a masculine, entity. That is one thing. And the second thing is that even in the American context, um, it talks about this is very interesting, writing by this journalist called Susan Faludi. She talks about how this whole thing is that American man fatherless. I mean that itself is quite indicative. Trying to find himself out of IKEA brochures and entertainment. Some kind of a brochure, and yet we find that he is becoming feeling more and more irrelevant every day. And in the end, the fact that it ends on a more or less commercially or classically acceptable Hollywood notion of a kind of a denouement, there this man's acceptance of the woman, is in a way a kind of coming to terms with life. Is in a way it's a kind of growing up at the end, finding himself. And therefore, although women may be totally marginalized in all of David Fincher's films, that they have nothing to do. But then again, somebody has pointed out that all the women, they may not say much, may not do much, but every time in their gaze itself, there is a suggestion that there is in them a hidden knowledge about men which men themselves do not possess. I find that very interesting, that being this quiet observer of this masculinity, which we are allowing it to become toxic. And yet, at the same time, there is this very acute helplessness about it all, as it is made very evident in this film. And therefore, I would like to sort of see this reproduced, replayed in a scenario which is traditionally patriarchal, where women are just about finding their voices. So, how does the man deal with it? Is it through um, making a fight club? The only lesson which the movie gives us is that do not form a fight club. It tells us that there cannot be anything more meaningless than this. That's the whole point of the film. But yet, where does the solution lie? It is like in this film, as it ends, is he really converted? Has he really found himself when he holds the hand of the woman, when he accepts the woman? And when we finally realize that this whole character of Tyler is nothing but a figment of his imagination as a kind of an idealized male of a consumerist, society, we understand it. But does he understand it as fully as we would like him to? These are certain questions that come to my mind. This whole issue of masculinity is left uh, a little, you know, let us say unanswered, unaddressed in this film. That is something which I find very interesting. And why should it be applicable only to an American society? I mean, of course, I mean, you can take the contemporary European society, which the difference of degrees would be more or less the same as American. And this whole crisis of, I mean, this Susan Faludi, she has written about it's called backlash, how the American woman is the target of a whole lot of negativity because of her newfound voice. And then she also writes another novel, another book, which is called Stiff, where she interviews a whole lot of men as to how they feel more and more threatened, the more and more at a point of crisis in their masculinity without really understanding what is wrong with them and what is wrong with the society which is creating them. So we should look at the film that way. This thing of letting brute physical activity trying to dominate over another person is only one aspect. Are there suggestions of more viable, more acceptable means of solving the crisis, resolving the crisis of masculinity? And how does it apply to different kinds of society? That is something that I would like somebody to talk
Okay, yeah, thank you. And masculinity and consumerism, I think the way they are also, they seem to suggest an association with fascism is also, I think, a very interesting aspect of this film, because gradually we find Tyler becoming, an authoritarian figure, and his Fight Club, he kind of graduates into Project Mayhem, um, indulging in acts of terrorism, even, I think that kind of a trajectory of masculinities in the film is also interesting, and the end, and also I think we need to ask whether the film at some point is anti-women in looking at consumerism itself as, a kind of girly thing, as women enjoying um, uh, shopping. So that is something that comes to my mind, and in the end, whether after all this there is, a resurrection of heteronormativity, where the closing frame of the film is the man and the woman standing with interlocked fingers, and everything around them, just crumbling to dust. So, these are, I think, some of the things which also have their subtext. Anyone else would like to say something about, would like to comment on what we have been talking until now, or would like to come up with a new issue that the film deals with?
Can I say something?
Yes, Nikhil, please go ahead.
Uh, I was very surprised when very mainstream kind of movie um, you allotted for discussion. And then I did not know how.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Nikhil. Actually, I'm just playing the role of the moderator here because our moderator, Praveena Cooper, has not been able to log in due to some internet issues in her neighborhood. And
Oh,
so, she was keen on introducing this film for us. Unfortunately, that has not happened. So, you can, please go ahead. I just wanted to
okay.
use that
So,
choice.
right. So I was very curious as to how the curator would be making a case for selecting this film. And this is one of the films which made me feel to like study the difference between screenplay and the final product. Like, how does a director add his magic touch to the screenplay and transform what is there onto the film and then make it a complete experience. So it's a wonderful kind of example of how transform the idea of this schizophrenic hero who creates either or he is not aware that this double personality is there in his life. So if we go back to Silence of the Lambs, that was the first effort, successful of course, to make a horror movie out of the psychological horror. So until that point, we had all horror movies coming from the premise of supernatural horror, and there were ghosts and other kind of supernatural creatures that were causing the mayhem. But then Silence of the Lambs began this journey, and then if we look at the movement of the study in schizophrenia. So it shows that somewhere around 1980s in the US, a study was presented which made this particular disease well known to everybody. So it brought it to the masses. And then the filmmakers who are like Fincher, they were always looking for something different. Like supernatural horror was pretty common. Everybody was making films about it. But then they were looking for something that would come out of some real kind of phenomenon. And then Silence of the Lambs came, and then if you have also watched Seven, which came before Fight Club. So Seven is much more gruesome, and then when I was watching Seven, it frightened me. I mean, the way the whole horror is never shown; it's present only via sound. So the character speaks the villain. We never see the villain till the last scene, and then the acting is so fantastic. I wondered what would be the next stage of this director's work, and then came this movie. So I, I just thought how these people must be thinking. Like this is the um, movie where we have uh, earlier, like people must have made movies about the clinical kind of films where schizophrenia is discussed and then the nature of the disease is presented. But then the horror of it, when it is translated into a horror movie, so it came out for me really, really. What shall I say? I'm not getting the words for that. So I compared that with the movies made in Marathi. I don't remember the name of the movie, but there have been 2 or 3 movies in Marathi. Anand Patwardhan has made a movie about it probably. And then what they presented was a romantic kind of angle. And then there is a girl who sees that there is a another person in her life, and then all that. So I was wondering if we have any other movies in India, like Nikila did mention one movie in Kannada. So if there are other movies in Indian languages which treat the horror in this psychological way. So, if you could tell more such names, and then we could watch those movies and then compare these Indian movies with Fight Club as the starting point.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Nikhil. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Maybe someone could follow that up and think of it as a project for one of our future sessions. And you were talking about screenplay. This movie Fight Club is also actually an adaptation of a novel,
A novel, yes, I know.
Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know whether I'm getting the pronunciation right. Uh, so and I think he's also written the screenplay along with
Yes.
for the film. Yeah. So anyone else would like to take the discussion forward? Yeah. Funny Raj is asking which is the Anand Patwardhan film made in Marathi. Has Anand Patwardhan made feature films, Nikhil? I mean, I just think of it
Yes,
as a documentary
one of
because
his movies is going to be screened maybe in 2 3 days. So I received a
and
mail.
it's a feature film or it's
It's
a
a
fiction
feature
film.
film.
Oh,
Yes, yes,
okay,
yes.
okay. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyone else would like
Geeta,
to?
can I ask a question?
Yes, yes,
Huh?
please, Ranjit.
I would like sort of Nikhil to step in here. It was interesting that he mentioned seven, So there are obviously some very common themes playing between these two films, certain common concerns of David Fincher as a filmmaker. And yet this is a very different film. This, in a way, Fight Club is a culmination of what he had begun in his earlier films, this whole notion of a flawed masculinity. So I would like Nikhil to sort of tell us something about how he feels the difference between Seven, or the similarities between Seven and Fight Club, or anyone for that
Nikhil, would you like to take that up?
Oh, sure. I felt that he continued the genre. So both are in the psychological horror genre, and then the the hero is also repeated. So Brad Pitt is there in Seven, and that is probably the first time he received recognition from the wider audience as a good actor. And then beside him, we also had, I think, Morgan Freeman, so a renowned actor at that time. And then he stood out, and then that was something maybe that made him into a bigger star. So Fight Club, again, um, we have this character coming forth, looks like Brad Pitt, who is a policeman. So he, in the end of that movie, in Seven, the killer um, actually kills his wife, and then it seems like a natural progression of that character. So if you receive a shock like that, so he gives up being a policeman now, and then uh, he himself becomes a violent man. And then how this can be, connected with a journey of a character, although there is no direct connection made by the director of the movie, but then we can still see, because there is hardly any difference, except that in Seven he is much quieter and maybe more sensitive kind of person, but then he does show his anger now and then. And then here there is no villain outside the hero. The hero himself is the villain. So I like that. It's like going a step higher in terms of the cinematic achievement. You don't need a negative element in another person. You have it in yourself. And as a character, to show that. And then I don't remember the name of the other actor who plays the other side of Brad Pitt's character. But
Kevin
then
Kevin Spacey.
no, Kevin Spacey is the villain in Seven.
Okay.
uh, yeah, so
Edward Norton.
yes, Edward Norton. So, what a fantastic actor he is. I mean, it's like Brad Pitt ends and then Edward Norton begins. It's so much of the alignment of their emotions, and then the physicality. It's all so well taken over from Brad Pitt by Edward Norton. So I just loved that. I did not know how Fincher must have imagined all this, and how much the actors contribute. For me, it has always been something of a big curiosity as to what is the contribution of an individual artist to a work of art. So when I listen to, say, a Madan Mohan song, Lata Mangeshkar is the singer. So I don't know how much is uh, Lata's contribution to Madan Mohan's greatness, or the other way around. So, where one ends and then the other begins. And then when all of these come together, and they get a wonderful kind of script. So we have this movie like Seven, or we have a movie like Fight Club. So that is how I feel they are similar. I don't know if I um, answered your question in any way.
Nikhil also was asking about other Indian language films. Offhand, I can think of at least some three or four like that. In fact, Shutter Island has been remade into Malayalam. I think it's called Adiran. And it's also been remade into Kannada as Arakshaka. So these two are what I can kind of offhand remember. Where this is like this split schizophrenic kind of figure who misleads the audience in the course of narration. Recently, recently we watched a Tamil film. I think it's called Genius. Again, which kind of talks about this development of this schizophrenic persona because of a father who pushes the son to overachieve and things like that. I think one of Vikram's films also, I think, has this kind of split persona. Though I don't know if you can, I mean, there is no horror as such. Huh? Onion. Though I don't think there is any horror element as such. Huh? There is? Okay. So some of these films offhand I can think of, Nikhil, if that's of any use to you.
Where can we watch these? Are they there on Netflix or Amazon Prime? I mean,
Adiran,
that's also.
there is an unsubtitled, unfortunately, an unsubtitled version is available in one of the OTT platforms. Jishnu has joined us. Maybe Jishnu can tell us if there is a subtitle version available at all of Adiran, either Bhagyalakshmi or Jishnu. Arakshaka, again, there is no subtitle version, but it's available on YouTube. Lucia, it's a Kannada film. It's not available on any of the OTT platforms. But if anyone wants a copy of the film, I can share it privately with them, not a problem. It's not a horror film. But again, a very, very interesting way in which this character and the character's imagination comes to, kind of take equal position as much as the character himself. So the character and the character's imagination kind of seamlessly merge with each other in a film like Lucia. So yeah, these are the films that I can offhand think of.
That's a lot of films for that has come off the cuff, Nikhila. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and Genius is available on on one of the OTT platforms. It's a Tamil film. Probably it's on Prime. That's available. A subtitled version of that film is available. Yeah.
And Lucia is available in the subtitles?
Yes, the version I have is a subtitled version. I was one of the, it had a very different kind of distribution, online distribution. So I was one of the online distributors. So I have a distributor's copy of the film. In private, I can circulate to anyone who wants. I will send it to you, Nikhil. Surely, I'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
2080.
Yeah, anyone else would like to talk about the film? Sanjay, Sridhar, Paniraj. Tarkeshwar. We are like a rudderless boat today, there is no moderator. So please let each one of us feel that we need to make a contribution to.
Okay, I'll pitch in. Slightly.
Please, go ahead.
This is again very interesting observation by Nikhil as to he expressed a little bit of a surprise that how such a mainstream film was chosen as a part of this discussion, right, for this forum. Uh, it is a mainstream film, all right, but then probably it has been in the last 20 years or so one of the most talked about and written about films, you know. So why is it that people talk so much about Kill Bill, Quentin Tarantino? So, is this distinction between what is consciously an artistic product and something which is typically mainstream Hollywood or Bollywood product, that there is an artistic difference between the two. So would somebody like to sort of express her or his views on it? That is it all right to talk about Fight Club? Even if it was without all these levels of complexity and meaning that it has, that we arrive upon only when we think about it more and more and talk about it more and more. You know, I mean, I've seen people talking about the Fight Club as a kind of a, you know, symbol of a particular kind school of Buddhism, you know. So you can take it anywhere that you want to. The fact that it's a mainstream film and the fact that it is a cult classic, does it necessarily mean that you cannot talk about it? I don't know. This is my question. This is my observation that we tend to feel that any film which is not consciously quote unquote artistic uh, doesn't deserve the kind of attention that we pay to it. You know, of course, it is not true of Black White Club at all, but it can be said about any film. The most successful of a commercial film, we can talk about it and layers which are not very easily visible from our watching, from our viewing of that film. You know, so let's talk about Fight Club as a film. Is it worth talking about? Will somebody like to sort of pitch in here? I'd like to, hear the views of people that is it just violence? Is it just mindless violence? And in a society which is at some level totally unlike ours, as to how this happens. I am trying to connect this to a kind of a society wherein the same kind of a mindless behavior, it emerges from deep-rooted, deep-seated, concerns about masculinity which are generated by patriarchy. You know, so the manifestation may be different, you know, but the phenomenon is the same. Even it was interesting that Nikhil was talking about greed. Greed, the seven, he's talking about seven as a film, where the seven deadly sins are actually the same, which in the Fight Club are the consumerist concerns and sins of the present day society, but in a different form altogether. So that probably we can talk about the seven deadly sins. There is something medieval about that. There is something, religious about that. Whereas about a TV or a Nokia brochure, there is nothing really very profound to talk about it. So therefore, one may find it a little surprising that why are we talking about Fight Club? You know, that 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 problem is there. It needs to be addressed.
I'm not too sure if the violence is completely mindless, because I think Tyler is quite clear in his head that he's using violence as, some kind of a masochistic way of inflicting pain and suffering, so that which a man must needs to face in order to escape it. I know there is that really terribly gruesome scene in which he pours that acid lye on Norton's hand, and that entire scene, it's a very deliberate kind of violence. It's almost like a rite of passage for the male. So I'm not too sure if it is mindless. I haven't seen Seven, so I don't know, what kind of violence that film presents. But as far as Fight Club goes, I think there's a very specific purpose behind the the infliction of violence on oneself as well as on the other. It's a kind of death wish that that even Marla represents, and how one needs to overcome the fear of suffering and the fear of death by actually, going through pain and suffering, physical pain and suffering. So I think even violence is treated in a very nuanced manner in this film. Yeah, I can see Kalpalata has unmuted herself. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to add regarding the violence. Actually, the violence is not meaningless. I agree with you totally here, because the whole point of being violent in this film is being more closer to the reality, and avoiding the illusion of reality which is there in the world, in this consumerism and the material world. They are trying to remove the illusion, and they want to come closer and closer to the, because pain, they think that if the pain will bring more closer to the real. This is what I felt about the representation of violence in this film.
Okay, thank you. Nikhila?
Yeah, I too agree with Kalpalata more or less, because I too saw that violence worked precisely in that fashion. If consumerism is kind of a consumerism, and also I think this violence has to be juxtaposed with all those meetings which kind of seek to cover the pain and cover up the suffering that you're undergoing. These two are juxtaposed with each other, the Fight Club and the other kind of club, whether it's the club for alcoholics or the cancer patients. So I think these two work together they're juxtaposed together for us, while one seeks to act like, in some way as a placebo, or as a palliative kind of thing to kind of cover up the pain. The other one is, that is Fight Club, is serving to make you confront that pain, as it were, and own it, rather than mask it, push it away, deal with it, in ways that the other kind of club. So I think the movement between these two is quite interesting. So once he starts going to Fight Club, he stops going to the other kind of self-help groups. So that way, I think, as Kalpalata and Geeta, you said, I don't think it's entirely mindless or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Robert Paulson, that character, he actually emblematizes the efficacy of the Fight Club rather than the support group. Whereas Nikhila mentioned that, he actually says that I've stopped going there, I don't need it anymore. So, the externalization of violence seems to be a more effective way of coping with some kind of, loss and trauma in far more effective ways than actually just, meeting in a support group and hugging each other and crying, which are more passive ways of dealing with loss. And by extension, maybe there is the indication of, more feminine ways of dealing with loss.
Yeah, and also this point that is made in the film about conflict, and how so much of our life is about avoiding conflict. And Fight Club is where conflict is right there. I mean, you have to deal with it. So, bringing to the surface conflict is also a very important part of, learning to live in a different kind of society than the one the consumerist society prepares us for, I thought.
Yeah. Right.
Can I say something?
Yes, yes, please, Nikhil, go ahead.
There is a very nice series of documentaries on Netflix, which is called "The Movies That Made Us." So that gives us a good idea about how certain movies are made. So the movie that I have watched, like Ghostbusters, I have not watched, but then they have an episode about it. But then the other movie that I have watched is Home Alone. So that made me, I mean, after watching some of those episodes, that made me uh, look for some reading material. So I was reading about Blockbuster. So there is a book which talks about how the blockbuster movies are made, and then movie blockbusters is the title. So it talks about how somewhere around 1970s or late 1960s, the big studios became worried about movies not making enough money. And then the idea of the typical blockbuster movies with a big star cast, and then huge locations, and that lots of violence became the tools that these studios insisted on having in movies before financing the new projects. So if you see violence in this movie, I mean, yes, the other interpretation of the violence in the movie is the other sociological or psychological aspects. But then if Fincher wanted any studio to finance his project, and the story is about violence, and it is on a personal level, like these art film perspective movie makers, they would show the violence in personal life, so they wouldn't make it bigger on scale in the movie. They would keep it within, say, a family or between two people. So the same is um, projected on a wider scale in a commercial way, because there are certain things that changed in the 60s and 70s. So the young generation started to watch these movies in cinemas which were away from the places of residence. And then families no longer frequented cinema halls to watch movies. So when your audience belongs to a certain category, and then they are going to watch your movies or not watch, so anything that appeals to the young generation is mainly violence and love. So love appeals to only a few people, but then violence appeals to everybody. Either one is afraid of it, or one is inspired to cause it. And then if one wants a movie, like a director or a producer wants to movie to have a mass appeal, uh, the violence does come in. So if you see Avengers, now Avengers talk about the allegiance to their fellow Avengers, and that's why they go back in time and all that. And but then how does the studio show it? Like, why would Thanos need to use his fists to kill any of the Avengers? He can just think about it, and they would be gone. But then the movie would end. So to my mind, the violence is a commercial decision. If there is no violence, there is no audience, and there is no audience, so there is no finance. So it would be a small budget movie, and then it wouldn't be made probably, because many movies were they went to the sets and then they were never completed. So that could be a commercial choice as well. The violence, I mean, the way it is projected on the screen.
Hmm. Would anyone like to talk about this or any other aspect of Fight Club? Anyone who hasn't yet spoken? Sanjay, Tarkeshwar, Bhagyalakshmi, Shaila, Maniraj. Yes, Tarkeshwar, please go ahead.
Uh, so I'm not an expert on these Hollywood movies, but I watched this, and it was not shocking or surprising or something that uh, astonished me. Uh, though this film came in 1990s, late 1990s, I had already watched Lucia, so I knew a particular kind of genre where such things happen and what to expect. So I was already prepared myself. So in that sense, there was no shock at the end because I was expecting it. And even this narrative style is not something new. I uh, feel people who are well versed with literature and theater, we know that how do we externalize the internal uh, trauma? So you are the ideas, you make them as characters. The ideas become characters. So if there is a split personality, making it another character is not a big deal. It is a age-old uh, simple technique that has been employed in literature. Even mythology, you can say that Rama, Ravana are not two different persons. Both good and evil exist in the same person. So you should take it as a kind of symbolic. Such things exist. So in that sense, it is not a innovation as such. But what I thought is important in this narrative, by creating this split personalities and giving them two characters and placing it in a particular context in the 1990s is interesting. So what it is doing, this particular narrative technique within that narrative, is something that we need to look at. So there is a critique of capitalism, and then there is an alternative that is being provided, which you can characterize it as masculine, violent, and things like that. And even violence is, it is not great. I've seen much more violent things on screen, both mainstream and off mainstream, in all kinds of movies. So it is not, but the kind of violence that is we are talking about within this narrative is coming as an alternative to a systematic way of living, a capitalistic way of living, which has no ups and downs. Even a tragic uh, story of somebody dying with a cancer or something else is also, you gather together and you speak, you cry. Even that is not robbed of its tragedy or uh, its drama. So when that is the case, there is something else. The drama is being given to you, and the violence both inflicting on oneself and also on the system itself by attacking the street and cars and whatever it is. So in that sense, it more looks like a twin of capitalism itself. So the capitalism has created certain kind of malaise, and because it has created that kind of malaise, it has also created a kind of reaction to it. Both are twins. So this cult violence that we see often in uh, the highly modernized world, and if you think India is also a modernized world, you see this kind of cult violence within India too. but how do we characterize it is a different thing. So this kind of cult violence, which is a twin of the capitalism. So both happen together, and both complement each other. And interestingly, in this narrative, the invocation of fascism is also quite interesting. How the capitalism can lead to fascism too, and what kind of fascism is that, and how this alternative culture to the capitalist consumerist way of life is also problematic. Not problem. Is also justifies itself through I philosophy. So the other character justifying what they are doing with I philosophy, which can even convince some of us who are actually party to fascism even in India, is quite interesting. So this kind of even within the Western philosophy, how some of the philosophers who we rate highly have contributed to fascism even in Europe is also quite interesting. So the self-justification of these cults, both for the violence and also a critique of capitalism, and then the justification of fascism is also quite interesting, I thought. So we need to understand both the technique and the violence that we are talking about in the context of the narrative. So once we extrapolate these issues outside the narrative, we can also discuss violence per se and masculinity per se, and also this technique per se, but that may not uh, throw much light on this particular film that we are discussing. That's what I think.
Thank you, Tarkishwar. Would anyone else like to intervene? Sanjay, would you like to say something?
Yeah, actually, it makes more sense when we put the problem of capitalism and the way they address both of them, how they result in failure. Actually, initially they are trying to project, and they are trying to criticize mindless consumerism. Somebody who is keen on just collecting designer clothes, designer furniture, to assemble designer kitchen. But what kind of solution they are giving, that finally leads to a kind of authoritarian living, when people are ready to accept anything. They are not questioning, because one of the rules is to not ask questions. Complete obedience. This is one of the characteristics of an authoritarian society, where you should not ask any question. So finally what happens, that it becomes like whatever alternative they are trying to project becomes an mirror image of what already they are criticizing, what is outside. So I don't know, because I was a bit confused at what this film is trying to say. As far as Nietzschean link is concerned, I'm not very convinced, because what is Nietzschean here? I don't find any clear link, because if you see Nietzschean, then he would be in many sense like that questioning, starting from Plato's philosophy, the foundation, the founder of philosophy, questioning from the very beginning of Greek philosophy. But one thing is sure, that we know at least what happens in the mind of a person who is ready to destroy, who is ready to plant bombs. in buildings. These two like towers, several towers falling, that also remind us of what happened, in 2001 in the US. So at least we come to see that what happens in the mind of the people who are keen on destroying the visible signs of capitalism. This is what happened when that Twin Tower incident happened. One French philosopher, André Glucksmann, he said that, if you want to understand this phenomenon, you have to read Dostoevsky. He said everyone to read Dostoevsky, otherwise you will not understand it. What is happening in the mind of Raskolnikov? Why does he kill the landlady? So what pushes us towards this kind of violence, at least we are able to see in this film, but somehow I feel that we are stranded. There is no alternative, and the alternative they are providing is, as bad or maybe worse than the problem which they are highlighting. So somewhere we feel like, pathless, rudderless, hanging in the balance, still searching for the meaning, searching for the solution, but we are not able to get it. So this is the place probably, that space which gives an opportunity to authoritarian figures to rise, to fascism to rise. What is happening everywhere all around the world. So probably we get a glimpse of that through this film. Thank you.
Ma'am.
Yeah, Shaila, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to say a few points. First thing is, like I've been in film school and all. This is one of the most discussed film.
Mhm.
Like in 8-9 years, we have been discussing about film a lot. It's not about a mainstream or or a third parallel film or anything of that sort, but when it comes to the director David Fincher, his works, it's mostly discussed because the way he discusses very subtle ideas in a very large scale, on a large scale. Talking about the character itself, the when we see the first frame of the film, we see we see this guy, Norton, on a chair tied up, and everyone is asking me about who is this Tyler Durden. And the point with him and about his character itself, him being insomnia and blah and etc. It always reminds me of Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. And all sort of consumerism, all sort of these, how you should be in a society, how you think, how your mind thinks, and you being going to a help group, compared to you want to get out of that and you want to show your real aggressiveness. That's how you build your own fight club, is it? Like how Travis, he decides to take up the action on against the politician. Over here, our mind being the what do you say, the monster mind being the conflict, he takes this path, he builds up. Do any of you think Marla is real? Or of course we know that Tyler Durden is not. Do we have, I'm not sure, I've missed the first 5-10 minutes of the discussion, but I wanted to know how many of you actually believe Marla exists, and how many of you actually have anything to tell about the character itself. That's not just the consumerism or about the things we are discussing so far. I just wanted to know about these few things. How many of you do see Travis Bickle? Or there's another film in 1955 which has come. I'm not sure of the film's name. Let me give me a second. I'll just come back to the film name, which is similar to this film again. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Shaila. Yeah, would anyone like to, yeah, Kalpalata, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one sentence. The Fight Club, the title is The Fight Club. The fight is inside the individual, which this film is trying to portray. It is not outside. We have to fight the inner demons, which it is very metaphorical, according to me. This is all I wanted to say.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I think Sanjay was talking about the Nietzschean subtext of the film, and those who have read it as exemplifying Nietzschean philosophy, I think they have looked at Norton's character as trying to, write as representing the right, coming out of the herd mentality, because initially he's seen as any person living in a capitalist society, who's just ordering randomly IKEA furniture and trying to amass all that and value those kinds of commodities. So he is part of the herd. And it's only when he begins to realize the kind of monotony and a kind of restlessness that surfaces in this capitalist society. That is when his struggle to overcome that herd mentality, which Nietzsche talks about, and that is what is needed in order to become an individual. And of course, in the Nietzschean sense, the Ubermensch or the Superman, the one who is able to rise above the herd. So I think to that extent, that is what people who have, scholars who have read this film as a Nietzschean text have focused their attention on, and also the nihilistic aspect of the film. There is so much. Tyler's character is, there's so much nihilism in his way of thinking and in his solution to the problems of capitalist society as well. But at a metaphoric level, I think all that self destruction is something that is aimed towards the destruction of the false self. And once the false self is destroyed, then that is where the essence or the true self of an individual can actually come to fore, can actually surface out of the ashes of this destruction of the false self. So this is, from my very elementary understanding of Nietzsche, I think to that extent, this film can be read as representing certain principles of Nietzsche.
No, with regard to Shailashri's question about Marla, yeah, that's quite interesting in the sense how much of the film that we are watching is something that this character is building for us. You can ask this question about Marla. You can ask this question also about, his boss. So it seems like these are all manufactured entities of the mind, which we are seeing. So it would be difficult for us to say, are these real characters out there, or are these figures whom he has manufactured, and through these creations, these figments of imagination, how he's kind of manifesting his conflict. I don't know if, so I think, as Shaila says, it's a very important question to ask, whether Marla is real. I mean, whatever we mean by that, how she is, whether she's a character at the same level as the character played by Edward Norton, or is she a creation? So therefore, a secondary level character in the film. I don't know if Shaila was talking about this 1946 film called The Stranger, about this clock repairer. I don't know if that's the film that.
The film name is it's just a second, ma'am. I just saw. Um, it's about a rebel without a cause or something like. Most of them they have discussed about this, and also the film Graduate. What I was trying to point out is the gendering of the character of Marla and Brad Pitt's character. So when he is rebellious, and when in the whole film when we see the gendering of Marla as being, of course, a partner of someone whom you can share things, who also walks around with you. But when it comes to being rebellious and being outspoken or things like that, the gendering is always masculine. And the boss is also, if you see in the whole in the boss scenes, the office scenes, you don't see women exactly. The I'm trying to point out about the gender play even in those in the screenplay of his mind. And you're talking about boss. The boss is also, you see, when you say boss, it's always a man. I was trying to talk about this earlier. Actually, it's been quite a long time, but even in the first frame of the film, you see Brad Pitt in the frame. Brad Pitt is the one who is holding the gun towards Norton, and he says that everyone's back of me. He was asking about Taylor Duran and all that. And in the next shot is Brad Pitt is looking towards the audience, and in the background we see Norton being tied in the chair. If you see this scene, if you see the first frame opening in that, and it's enough to, he's talking about buildings being collapsed. He talks about the support group guy whom he describes about his physical this that and all. So in that first sense only, what is the director trying to point out? Who is the audience back of, who is that person who's back of Taylor Duran? I mean, the society I'm talking about. uh is a society trying to look for Tyler Duran because he's rebellious, and they're holding Norton in the with the gun point. I mean, there are a lot of questions. So, but it was interesting to see different ideas come up today. Anyone even thought about Travis Bickle, the gun pointing towards himself. Over here, the gun points at the character as well. So even Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver by Martin Scorsese is insomniac. He roams around the city, New York City, and he builds himself again. He also builds himself a world within where he can live, you know. And he has problem with the politician. Over here, our character, Norton has, you know, he has to reach societal standards. You know, he's been told to follow some rules. And also the main rule of the film is not to talk about Fight Club. That is your real sense. You don't have the freedom to talk about what you want to. So Fight Clubs gives you that gate, that way, that door where you can do things and you can bring your freedom out and do as whatever you want. And over there also you see Brad Pitt, you know, being that support, a masculine uh, supporter.
About Taxi Driver, Shaila, yeah, there is a similarity now that you mention it, and also the voiceover,
Yeah.
which is present in both. So, but only thing is, there is no split persona, a second figure who appears on the screen as such. So it's not like it is externalized and we're seeing another character at
Yeah.
all. But as you say, we kind of go through the mind of what is happening, his conflicts and his interactions with the prostitute, and how he has to kind of morally reform her as a way of constituting himself as a more masculine figure. All those things work even in the Taxi Driver, I think.
Yeah. And also talking about the director, a lot of things. We were talking about Seven has so many similarities even in Fight Club. Like the characteristics itself, the character of the salesman, you know, all those things, and the house and the falling down building. You can always hear a train sound running in the background. Even in Seven, when there is a conversation between the two detectives and the wife, Brad Pitt's wife, you see a train going behind, and he says, there's a station behind my house in Seven. Whereas over here also, when the building is collapsing, you can always hear a train sound. So he tries to bring his uh, you know elements in most of his films, may it be even Zodiac or many other films. I'm not sure, I'm not getting the names right now. And also in Seven, there is this wife, there is this the partner of Brad Pitt, who's an elder person. So the story revolves around these three people.
With regard to Marla, I think there's a lot of similarity between her and the narrator. Like um,
Yeah.
both are filled with the kind of angst of the modern age, and Marla in particular is completely kind of obsessed with a death wish. Like, on the one hand, she says, I want to have your baby to Tyler. And then she says, I want to have the baby in order to have an abortion.
Mhm.
And she's also, like completely addicted to Xanax and very self-destructive. And that is why, in the end, it's interesting that these two characters, the narrator and Marla, get together. But like Sanjay said, we are not sure whether they have actually resolved their problems and arrived at any kind of self-realization, or any kind of resolution to their inner conflict. But at the same time, they I think they find peace and comfort with each other. at least that is what the final scene of the film seems to convey. Like there will always be conflict. It is not that it can never be. I mean, it can be resolved in totality. But if there is, if there is a co-traveler in your life, who will move along with you, along with your conflict, then perhaps it can get a little simpler. Maybe that's what the end is suggesting. I mean, I'm just thinking right now. It's not a well formulated thought in my head as well. Okay, any more interventions, or shall we close the session? It's 10:30 now. Nikhila, shall we close it?
Yeah, apologies that Pravina could not join us.
Yeah, I know that's really
Hope we
unfortunate.
will be able to share her PPT at some point with
Yes,
everyone.
yes. I think I will request her to do that, and we could put it up on our group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you all very much, and I think this rudderless boat has quite safely reached the shore. So once again, happy holidays to everybody, season's greetings, and good night, and have a good holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Meet
ma'am.
again next
Good
time.
night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Good night.
Bye.